Which fights are worth fighting, Saadi, the ancient Persian sage, tells a story. "Surely, violence isn't the answer," the young traveler exclaimed, a hopeful glint in his eyes. His companion chuckled, patting the hilt of his well-worn sword. "Perhaps not, but it often gets the loudest applause." They had stumbled upon a chaotic scene, two groups of travelers, brawling amidst the swirling dust of the desert road. The young traveler saw an opportunity for peacemaking. "Friends, why waste your strength on fighting? Let us reason together." A moment of stunned silence followed. Then a burly man from one group turned, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "Look, boys, a peacemaker. Shall we show him how we settle things out here?" The two groups, momentarily united, descended upon the hapless travelers. A flurry of fists and kicks ensued, leaving the two friends sprawled on the ground, battered and bewildered. Later, as they nursed their wounds beneath the starry sky, the young traveler sighed. "Perhaps," he admitted, "I underestimated the power of stubbornness." His companion, a rueful smile playing on his lips, replied, "Or perhaps you overestimated the allure of reason in a world that often rewards brute force. But fear not, my friend. We may be bruised, but we are not broken. And who knows, perhaps next time we'll encounter a fight worth joining." Recognize your privilege. Saadi, the ancient Persian sage, has a story for you. It is said that in the days of yore, in the deserts of Arabia, there was a group of robbers who had set up their hideout on the peak of a mountain. Whenever a caravan passed by, they would descend from the mountain and loot it. The robbers' hideout was so secure that no attempt to capture them had ever succeeded. Anyone who ventured near would be spotted from afar, and the would-be captors would turn back in fear. When the robbers' audacity exceeded all bounds, the king appointed a clever spy to apprehend them. The spy concealed himself, and when the robbers left their hideout to conduct a raid, he informed the royal army. The soldiers reached the mountaintop and hid themselves. Upon returning from their raid, the robbers, exhausted, fell asleep. When the soldiers were certain that the robbers were fast asleep, they bound them with strong ropes and presented them before the king. The king immediately ordered their execution. Among these robbers was a youth, the son of a nobleman. When the king's minister saw him, he felt pity for him. So he pleaded with the king, "Your Majesty, have mercy on this youth and spare his life. He is still young and has only seen a few springs of life. If he is provided with proper education and upbringing, he can become a good person." The king was not pleased with his minister's words. He said, "Education and upbringing cannot change a person's inherent nature. This youth was a member of a dangerous gang of robbers. It is essential that he be executed along with the other robbers. It is not wise to extinguish a fire and leave the embers burning, or to kill a snake and let its offspring live." The minister agreed with the king's words. However, he found another opportunity and once again advocated for the young man. The king remained silent this time, and the minister took the opportunity to free the young robber and arrange for his education and upbringing. However, after a short while, the young man gathered a group of wicked and foolish youths. They killed a wealthy merchant's sons, looted his house, and fled. They then established their own hideout in the same mountain cave where the other robbers had once resided. When the king was informed of this incident, he was deeply saddened and said to his minister, "You see, even the best upbringing cannot reform those who are inherently evil. Just as a blacksmith cannot forge a good sword from inferior iron, rain cannot transform barren land into a fertile garden. Though water from the cloud is always pure, it does not revive every soil in the same way. Some soil yields tulips and hyacinths, while others produce thorns and weeds." Saadi, in this tale, has subtly hinted at the fact that one should not expect good from those who are inherently evil. There is a famous saying, "A dog's tail cannot be straightened."
This is particularly relevant here because Saadi, even in the 13th century when racist views were rampant, did not believe that some human races are noble and others are base, as was commonly believed at that time. Instead, his reference is to the noble and base traits of individuals or humans that we see in our world. One person is ungrateful for a big favor and takes it for granted and does not recognize their privilege, while another considers sacrificing their life for the sake of trust and humanity as a trivial matter. This might be a troubling thought, but such is life.
The burden of responsibility. Saadi, an ancient sage, tells a story. The heavier the crown, the lighter the head. A king once sat in his grand court, surrounded by courtiers and jewels, yet a shadow of loneliness loomed over him. The tales of fallen kings echoed through the halls, whispered by servants and sung by bards. Why had mighty rulers lost their kingdoms, their people, their very souls? The king's advisor saw the question in his monarch's eyes. "Majesty," he began, "a kingdom is not built on gold or armies, but on the hearts of its people. A king who oppresses his subjects is like a man who cuts off his own limbs." The king, however, scoffed. "Foolishness. Power is all that matters. A strong king needs no love, only obedience." The advisor lowered his head, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. "Then, Majesty, you are doomed to fall like the kings before you." Enraged by this prophecy, the king banished the advisor, his pride refusing to heed the truth. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers of discontent grew louder. The people, tired of the king's cruelty, began to rebel. The king's soldiers, once loyal, now hesitated, their hearts no longer in the fight. In the end, the king found himself alone, his crown heavy on his head, his kingdom crumbling around him. He realized, too late, the truth of the advisor's words. The heavier the crown, the lighter the head. A king who forgets his burden of responsibility to his community and to his people is no king at all. The difference between just knowing and truly knowing. Saadi explains this in his tale. It is said that the king of Cairo, eager for respite from the sweltering palace, embarked on a journey along the Nile. He was accompanied by his courtiers and slaves, one of whom had never before experienced the gentle rocking of a boat. Terror gripped the slave's heart as he imagined the cold depths claiming him, his cries echoing across the water. The king, a man of stern temperament, grew increasingly irritated by the slave's wailing. "Silence," he commanded. Among the king's entourage was a wise man. Observing the slave's distress, he approached the king and said, "Your Majesty, with your permission, I believe I can alleviate this man's fear." Intrigued, the king granted his consent. The wise man then instructed the other slaves to seize the frightened man and cast him into the river. With a splash, the slave was submerged in the murky waters, his cries abruptly cut short, a stark contrast to his imagined terrors. After several agonizing moments, the wise man signaled for the slave to be pulled back onto the boat. Gasping for breath, he clung to the edge, his terror replaced by a newfound appreciation for the solid deck beneath his feet. The king, perplexed by this turn of events, inquired, "What wisdom lies in throwing a frightened man into the river, only to rescue him moments later?" The wise man smiled and replied, "Your Majesty, this slave had never known the hardship of the river, and thus could not truly appreciate the safety of the boat. Now, having experienced both, he understands the value of each." We often take our blessings for granted, failing to recognize their worth until we have tasted adversity. The king nodded, the wise man's words striking a chord within him. As they sailed, the king's thoughts turned to his courtiers, their eloquent speeches now ringing hollow. They spoke of grand ideals, yet their understanding was as shallow as a desert puddle,
for they had never truly tasted adversity. The wise man's lesson resonated. True wisdom lay not in lofty words, but in understanding forged through experience. It was the ability to see the world from both the throne and the gutter, to grasp the worth of both privilege and hardship. For the chasm between knowing this truth and ignoring it was as vast as that between heaven and hell, one leading to enlightenment and the other to a hollow existence.
Who Loves You Truly? A Tale of Truth by Saadi. Mother, why must I always listen to you? The young man spat, his voice dripping with disdain. He was strong, intelligent, the world at his fingertips. Why should he heed the words of a woman who could barely keep up with the times? His mother looked at him with eyes that held both sorrow and wisdom. She didn't scold, she didn't argue. Instead, she led him to a dusty attic where a small wooden cradle lay forgotten in a corner. "Do you remember this, my son?" she asked softly. The young man scoffed. "A relic of a bygone era. What does it have to do with me?" His mother's smile was tinged with sadness. "This, my dear son, was where you spent your first months. Helpless, dependent, unable to even swat a fly from your face. I was the one who nurtured you, who fed you with my own blood, who rocked you to sleep with endless lullabies." Her words struck him like a thunderbolt. Memories, long buried beneath layers of arrogance, began to surface. "But mother, that was then. I'm a man now, strong and capable." "Yes, my son, you are," his mother agreed. "But just as the seasons change, so does life. Strength fades, youth gives way to age, and the world that once seemed so vast begins to shrink. The day will come when you will need someone to care for you, just as you needed me in those early days." A profound silence filled the attic, broken only by the creaking of the old house. The young man looked at his mother, truly seeing her for the first time in years. The lines on her face were a testament to a life spent in selfless love, the dimming of her eyes a reflection of the sacrifices she had made for him. "Why must I always listen to you, mother?" he repeated. "Because, my son," she whispered, "I have walked the path you are on now, and I know the pitfalls that lie ahead. Listen, not because I am always right, but because I love you enough to guide you, even when you stumble." The young man emerged from the attic, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He carried the weight of his parents' love, a precious burden that would forever shape his path. He understood that their sacrifices were not mere acts of duty, but expressions of a love so pure and selfless that it transcended the boundaries of time and age. In their fading strength, he saw his own mortality, a poignant reminder of the fleeting nature of life, the cycle that must never be forgotten. The most important thing to live a good life, ancient Persian sage Saadi tells a story about it. "Is pride worth more than a life?" the frail king wheezed, his voice barely a whisper above the crackling fire. The royal physician, a man of renowned skill but humble demeanor, bowed his head. "Your Majesty, pride is a dangerous beast. It devours gratitude and leaves a hollow shell in its wake. Months earlier, this very physician had mended the king's broken neck, saving him from certain death. But upon his return, he was met with cold indifference, as if the king had never known him. This blatant ingratitude stung deeper than any wound. "Fetch me those herbs," the king rasped, gesturing to a bundle on the table. "The Greek physician's gift, they say. Burn them, and let the smoke heal me." The physician's eyes flickered with a hint of grim satisfaction. He had not come to heal this time. The room filled with acrid smoke as the herbs smoldered. The king inhaled deeply, then erupted in a fit of violent coughs. His neck bones, once mended, shifted and cracked. Agony contorted his face. "Find him! Bring back the Greek!" he screamed, his voice strangled by pain. But the physician was long gone, leaving behind only the echoes of his final words. "A broken neck can be healed, Your Majesty, but a broken soul is beyond my skill." The fire crackled, the king's cries fading into the night. A single question lingered in the smoky air, its answer as cold and stark as the king's empty heart. Is pride worth more than a life? Indeed, it was not. What holds greater value in life, the fleeting power of authority or the enduring wisdom of knowledge? In our quest for purpose, this question often arises. Ancient sage Saadi tells a story that sheds light on this very dilemma. In the ancient land of Egypt, two brothers were born into a noble family. The elder, Imad, was driven by ambition and a desire for influence. From a young age, he immersed himself in the arts of leadership, strategy, and governance. He believed that mastering these skills would elevate him to greatness and bring honor to his name. The younger brother, Wali, was contemplative and gentle. Drawn to the pursuit of spiritual understanding, he dedicated his life to studying sacred texts and learning from wise teachers. As the years passed, Imad's aspirations materialized. Through cunning and determination, he ascended to become the ruler of the land. Surrounded by opulence, he commanded armies and dictated laws. People bowed before him, and his name was spoken with both awe and fear. Wali, meanwhile, led a modest life. He resided in a humble dwelling, taught eager students, and penned insightful treatises. Though he lacked material wealth, he was rich in knowledge and inner peace. Despite their shared lineage, Imad often regarded Wali with a mix of pity and scorn. He could not fathom why his brother chose a life of obscurity when the path to power was within reach. During a grand feast at the palace, Imad addressed Wali before the assembled guests. He suggested that Wali had squandered his potential by not pursuing a path that would bring prestige and honor to their family name. Imad boasted of his own achievements, implying that Wali's contributions were insignificant in comparison. Wali listened quietly, his expression serene. He understood that Imad equated honor with external success and did not grasp the value of inner wisdom. The guests watched, anticipating a retort or defense. Instead, Wali reflected on his brother's words, recognizing the emptiness behind them. In his heart, Wali felt gratitude for the path he had chosen. He knew that true honor was not bestowed by titles or wealth, but was found in the enlightenment of the soul. While Imad held sway over the bodies of men, Wali touched their hearts and minds. He was thankful that he did not possess power that could tempt him to inflict harm or injustice upon others. As silence enveloped the hall, the guests sensed a profound truth in Wali's quiet composure. Without uttering a single word of rebuke, his presence conveyed a wisdom that transcended Imad's grandiose displays. Some of Imad's advisors began to question the nature of true success and the cost at which it came. In the days that followed, whispers of the brothers' encounter spread throughout the land. People pondered the contrast between Imad's restless pursuit of power and Wali's serene contentment. Many sought out Wali's teachings, yearning for the peace that eluded them in their worldly endeavors. Even Imad found himself troubled by a lingering dissatisfaction. Despite his achievements, an emptiness gnawed at him. He recalled the tranquility in Wali's eyes and began to realize that all his power could not grant him the fulfillment he sought. Eventually, he approached his brother, seeking guidance and understanding. Wali welcomed Imad with open arms. Together, they delved into discussions about wisdom, purpose, and the responsibilities that come with leadership. Imad learned that true greatness lay not in dominating others, but in serving them with compassion and justice. Through his brother's insights, he began to rule with a renewed spirit, valuing the well-being of his people above his own ambition. So, what holds greater value in life, the fleeting power of authority, or the enduring wisdom of knowledge? As ancient sage Saadi's story reveals, true honor is not measured by the might we wield, but by the wisdom we cultivate and share. In embracing this truth, we find not only our own fulfillment, but also the betterment of those around us.